You, Nora, and many thanks for CEMAsys for the invitation to participate in this event. As mentioned by Nora, I'm part of CDP's Commit to Action team and the SBTi corporate engagement team, and I am responsible for the European region. I'm delighted to be here today to provide an introduction to science-based targets, who we are, what we're doing, and give you an overview of the most important things you need to know about the recent developments of the SBTi. So to reach that goal today, we'll start with defining science-based targets, see how to join the initiative and how to set targets, and finally see what changes are planned by the initiative. So to start off with the first item on the agenda, quickly, a brief introduction of what the SBTi is. The initiative was founded in 2015 as a collaboration between 4 partner organizations. These include CDP, the UNGC Global Compact, the World Resources Institute, and WWF. The goal of the SBTi is to drive ambitious climate action in the private sector by enabling companies to set emissions reductions targets, which are based on science and are consistent with the goals of the Paris Agreement. And as the numbers on this slide illustrate, the initiative has had very strong traction, with now more than 2,000 companies in total having joined the SBTi, and 965 companies that have committed to align their reductions with a 1.5 degree future through the Business Ambition for 1.5 degree campaign. I'll move on now to briefly explain what science-based targets, or SBTs, as we refer to them, are. And SBTs are short to medium-term corporate emissions reductions targets that are in line with the level of decarbonization needed to limiting global warming to within 1.5 to 2 degrees above pre-industrial level. And they are a key tool to prepare for and accelerate the transition to a zero carbon economy. So in simple terms, SBTs help your company determine how much and how fast you need to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. So this really means that they are the stepping stones that companies need to take on the long-term goal of reaching net zero by 2050. So why do companies set SBTs? What are the business drivers behind? Firstly, it is to seize and take advantage of opportunities within the low carbon transition. For example, by innovating on the development of low carbon products and services. It is also to anticipate regulatory and policy developments. So we are seeing more and more ambitious national climate targets that are being announced, and these will over time become the norm. So by setting an SBT, your company can stay ahead of the curve on regulation and mitigate transition risks. Additionally, there is inherent competitiveness behind the low carbon transition. For example, minimizing energy or emissions related costs. And finally, probably more importantly, it is to address expectations from stakeholders, including customers, but most of all, investors who are expecting companies to have these kind of robust targets in place in order to future-proof their business for the low carbon transition. So moving on to how can a company join the SBTi and set a target. I will provide you with an overview of the SBTi journey. So the first step is the commitment, and I'll talk a little bit more about the different commitment option in the next slide. But once a company commits, this kicks off a 24-month period where the company has publicly demonstrated a commitment to setting SBTs. And within that time frame, they will model their targets, submit the targets to the SBTi for validation, and announce the target publicly. And once the target is approved by the SBTi, that's where the real work starts, and companies can start implementing and also tracking and disclosing their progress against the target. So there are a number of ways to commit to the SBTi, and the first one I will mention is through the standard commitment letter, in which companies agree to set targets that are in line with the minimum level of ambition outlined by the SBTi criteria. The next is committing via the business ambition for 1.5 degree campaign, which is the leadership track. This campaign was launched in 2019, following the publication of the IPCC report in 2018. I would like to mention, though, that from the 28th of October, so tomorrow onwards, this letter will fully be integrated into the standard commitment letter. And the BA 1.5 or business ambition for 1.5 degree commitment letter, as we know it today, will be phased out and updated in the next few months. I will get back to this topic in a few slides. And finally, to mention that there is also a third way that is specifically designed for small and medium enterprises to facilitate the process of setting targets for them as well. So once the commitment has been made, your company will then have to get to work on the second step of actually developing and setting your targets. So companies get started by understanding their emissions and quantifying them. Once there is a complete greenhouse gas inventory, you can start the target setting process using the SBTi criteria and recommendation document. And this document is available on our SBTi website. Today, I'll just give you an overview of the most important criteria, which are the 6 criteria listed on this slide. The first one is the level of ambition. So the minimum level of ambition for scopes 1 and 2 is a well below 2 degree alignment. The SBTi has been encouraging 1.5 degree alignment since 2019. And in July of this year, we have communicated that the minimum level of ambition will increase in the next criteria update, and this criteria will become mandatory and come into force in July 2022, so next year. The second criterion is progress. So SBTs need to be forward-looking. The boundary criterion is asking companies to set targets that cover at least 95% of their company-wide scope 1 and 2 emissions. So only a maximum of 5% combined can be excluded. The timeframe of SBTs are 5 to 15 years into the future. From the day that companies submit their targets for validation by the initiative, this is also going to change. I will explain it a little bit later. And in terms of reporting, we ask companies to annually disclose their greenhouse gas inventory and progress against the targets in a public way. And finally, for scope 3, companies need to conduct a full screening of their scope 3 emissions. So it is a screening and not a full inventory. And if that screening shows that 40% or more of their total scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions come from scope 3, then the company has to set a target for scope 3 as well. So moving on to the developments that have been happening in the SBTi lately. And I would like to start off with a bit of context and timeline as to why this all started and how it has developed over time. As previously mentioned, the SBTi journey started in 2015 before the Paris Agreement. And back then the science was saying that we need to keep warming to within 2 degrees. So the target setting framework of the SBTi was based on that trajectory, but over time, this has changed, particularly after the publication of the IPCC report in 2018. The aim now was 1.5 degrees and no longer 2 degrees. So the business ambition for 1.5 degree campaign was launched soon after that, and this was intended to drive more ambitious action and get companies to align with what at the time was the leadership path in the lead up to COP26. And the business ambition for 1.5 degree campaign has been a very big success with more than 960 companies that joined. And this campaign has helped make 1.5 degrees the new normal for companies to set SBTs. I would like to mention as well that for the past 2 years, the SBTi has been working on developing a net zero standard. This standard has been finalized and will also be launched tomorrow on the 28th of October. And there is a webinar planned for this that I have linked at the end of the presentation. So one key thing to know is that when the Business Ambition campaign kicked off, 1.5 degree was considered leadership level, but it has now evolved to become the new normal. And with the success of this campaign, we managed to build momentum around 1.5 degrees. And this has become the most common temperature companies choose to actually set their targets, with 66% of the targets validated this year, at least for scope 1 and 2, that are 1.5 degree aligned. And we saw also 100 more companies committing to set net zero targets once the standard comes out. So as a result, the SBTi took the decision to raise the minimum level of ambition for scopes 1 and 2 to 1.5 degrees. That means that after July 2022, so from the 15th of July of next year, well below 2 degree targets for scopes 1 and 2 will no longer be accepted, and all submitted targets will need to align with the new criteria that will be published very shortly. So this will then become version number 5 of the criteria, and the 3 key changes are the following. So firstly, for scope 1 and 2, the ambition is increasing from well below 2 degrees to 1.5 degrees. For scope 3, it is increasing from 2 degrees to well below 2 degrees. And the time frame is also changing with the increased urgency. It is shortened from 5 to 15 years to 5 to 10 years. So this slide is basically stating the same by comparing the current version on the left to the future version of the criteria. And version 5 will come out very shortly in the next few days, but will only come into force in July of next year. So this actually gives time for companies to familiarize with the criteria and digest the content a little bit. So to conclude, for companies that are considering joining the SBTi and setting a science-based target, there is a wide variety of resources available on our website that can support you in your target setting journey. And this includes tools, guidance documents, and online trainings as well. I have also previously mentioned the launch webinar for the net zero standard, which will take place tomorrow. So I've added a registration link at the bottom of the slide, but you can also find it on our SBTi website. Thank you very much, and looking forward to discussing with you at the end.
Thank you so much, Kenza. I hope you don't mind me quoting you on that. Making 1.5 degree the new normal. Presenting Cloetta. Maria is the sustainability manager at Cloetta, and she has a background in natural science and also a master's degree within sustainability and structuring. So welcome, Maria. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you as well, Kenza, for the presentation. And as well, it's great to have so many of you here and interested in joining the science-based targets. So I thought I would share a little bit of background, especially about Cloetta's journey. And it makes sense that we're going first because we're quite early in our journey. So we committed to the science-based targets last year in October 2020. And we're in the process now of just about to submit our targets. So I'm excited to bring you along on that journey. And if you haven't heard about Cloetta before, I'll just briefly get you up to speed. We're a company in Northern Europe. We're based in Sweden. Been around for over 100 years and serving quite a few markets as well, having quite a complex supply chain because we have several different categories ranging from chocolate, candy, pastilles, chewing gum, and nuts. And yeah, really where I come in today is talking about sustainability and how the science-based targets has actually been such a core of our sustainability program that we've developed. So our program is creating a sweeter future for you, our consumers, for people, and for the planet. And naturally, the focus today is really on our planet pillar. And like I said, our science-based target is really the foundation of our climate action initiative, which is to work towards our science-based target. And you see here the target is 46% absolute reduction by 2030. And that's compared to our 2019 base year, which will be the science-based or the target that we're submitting for validation to science-based targets. So I thought, like I said, to bring you along a little bit on the journey, and especially for the 20% of people who polled that they weren't quite ready, these were some really important notes that we brought to our management, and especially in the last 2 years that I've been at Cloetta, it's been quite a journey just to see the eyes open or the heads lift up when we're talking about our CO2 footprint, and going from thinking that we'll never need to calculate our CO2 footprint because that sounds like, yeah, with no return on investment and just a lot of time spent, to thinking actually this is going to be an integral part of our strategy of how to connect our other initiatives and really get something tangible to communicate as well, and also to track the progress. So a couple things to mention here. We've been members of the UN Global Compact since many years back. And so it makes sense that you can't just turn your head away and say that we're not actually interested in taking responsibility for our CO2 footprint. So that's one key area, is being in line with the Paris Agreement targets. And like I said, we committed before the latest IPCC report, but that has only reaffirmed our decision to really give some credibility and alignment behind our climate goals. And to build on that, I would say our climate goals previous to discussing science-based targets were only incremental and not so strategic, let's say, or grounded in science, or grounded in a global network where you actually have support and dialogue around this subject. So those are, kind of a mix of 3 reasons as to why we joined. And then as well, a more, let's say, reactive approach, but also business critical, was really our customers, and still increasingly so, have been voicing that we need you to join science-based targets, not only for their supply chain targets, but engagement targets, but also because, as we see now with our Scope 3 emissions, we really need to do this all together. And then I think kind of the most obvious one, actually everyone does benefit by joining science-based targets, not only our own supply chain and securing that we have a future, let's say with our agriculture and the changing climate and whatnot, but our employees benefit, our investors benefit. All around, it makes sense actually to really move in this direction. And then finally, a point as well that Kenza made was really harvesting the opportunities, not only talking about avoiding the risk. So looking at all of those aspects, those were kind of some of the key linchpins that came to the point of, okay, let's commit. But then we came to, okay, how do we do this, and how do we set our ambition, and where do we even start? And that's where we turned to CEMAsys. And this is actually a graph that they shared with us about how to set the ambition. And we really wanted to take this future focus and not revisit this again in a few years. So we decided to go with the 1.5 degree. The 1.5 degree ambition for all 3 of our scopes, which is very ambitious considering about 75%, actually even more, is coming from our scope 3 emissions. But yeah, more support that we got from CEMAsys was really in understanding this picture and getting the tools to use and the emission factors, and really understanding how are we going to set up our reporting and how are we going to map out where all of our actions need to take place. I would say some other main points that kind of have helped us along is just noticing, and I need to update my number already. Kenza, I imagine you have to update your presentation so often now that all of these companies are joining science-based targets like overnight. But since we've committed, over 800 companies have joined, and that is really good news, especially for us to reach our ambition, because we will not be able to do this alone. So really leaning into the opportunities around collaboration, and that we are working on this towards this goal together. So now, yeah, like you said, and I actually had to laugh when you said, once you submit it, then the real work starts, because it feels like the work has already started, just in terms of getting the alignment in the organization and the understanding that this will actually impact areas where sustainability hasn't really been on top of mind before. So it's a really cross-company collaborative approach. And so where we're at now is really establishing this plan, or it's really more of a program in our company where we have kind of like ambassadors across the whole company in every department, every market, where the point is really to talk about how are we going to reach this target? How can we improve our reporting? How can we get better data, whatnot? So yes, so then we mapped out quite a few potential actions, and really going from practical, already planned actions to more brainstorm, totally crazy, let's remove all whatever, yeah, you know, getting really creative with the approach of how to reduce our CO2 footprint. And then, like I said, part of this new culture is about creating this safe space for open conversation, innovative, as well as where everyone actually can provide some expertise. And I'm grateful for that, because I definitely do not have all of the answers. A lot of the answers are in the different departments where they've never thought about sustainability before, but in fact, they actually have some of the best suggestions of how to improve it. So yeah, just to share some other challenges that we still are working with today. One of them is really having the confidence behind our actions leading up to this 46%. Like I said, we have quite a good brainstorm of ideas, but to actually add up to what would be required is difficult, and mostly because of this dependency on our suppliers and the raw materials in our scope 3 emissions. There's, yeah, connected to that, as well as really figuring out what investment will this be, but we're kind of both trusting the process, but also really building the plan more so in the competence of our company, or the internal competence of how to reach or make these actions actually happen. And another challenge has been, like I said, to get really good data actually from our suppliers and get them on board with providing us with this good data, and also being interested themselves in knowing what their life cycle analyses are, or yeah, figuring out who should be calculating these emission factors if it's not them. And then some challenges so far in establishing this the climate action plan is really around making sure that we have the reporting systems in place, and especially people who have never thought about the CO2 footprint of their operations before, to really connect that and make that a bit less scary for them, I would say. So then some final notes to leave you with. Yeah, like I already mentioned, emphasizing that this is not the work of one company on their own in their little silo or bubble. It's really about working together with the suppliers or customers and having this be an open dialogue. And then, yeah, tapping into the opportunities that that can really create by working together on those things. And again, back to if it needs to be a key point to the group management, that there are actually more risks to the company to not join at all, and even to fail at reaching the target than to not try at all. Another tip when it comes to just starting this mapping process, and I would also add getting support from a team like CEMAsys, where they can actually help with the estimations, but starting with the estimations and at least getting ballpark figures compared to needing all of the correct and absolute data in place, I think is better than waiting for that to happen, because that feels a bit like it will never happen, but hopefully it will. But and then, like I said, really building the enthusiasm around, and that everyone actually can contribute. It doesn't need to come from this super expert, because we are all learning on this journey together. And also connected to this last point of creating a safe space for these innovations to come up, and ideas of who else could collaborate with it. So thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's interesting to hear the challenges as well. For example, data availability and supplier information. It's a journey. It takes time, and just starting with what you have is a good start. Thank you so much.
So our next panelist will be Jenny, representing Bama Fresh Cuts. Jenny has 20 years of experience working in the food industry. Today, she is holding the position as Head of Development and Sustainability in Bama. Thank you for being here today, Jenny, and welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Jenny, and I represent Bama Nordic, which is a part of Norwegian fruit and vegetable company Bama AS. Bama's mission to create green, responsible growth through fresh and healthy products based on collaboration in the entire value chain. And our vision, a healthier and fresher future, it's completely in line with science-based targets idea. So it felt right when a customer asked if we would like to join and help them fulfill their goals. Together we make a difference. Bama Nordic has 3 categories in which we operate: fresh cuts, convenience, and plant-based. Today, I would like to talk about fresh cuts, science-based journey, with focus on our reduction plan. We are through the application process, and our overall goal has been approved. Nice. Our overall goal is Bama Fresh Cuts AB commits to the reducing absolute scope 1 and 2 and 3 GHG emission by 30% by 2031 from a 2019 base year. But what does this overall goal mean, and how does it become concrete? I'll come back to this later in my presentation. In the application process, we were working in a small team consisting of our purchase manager, factory manager, HR manager, and myself, development and sustainability. We worked out facts and input to scope 1, 2, and 3. Each step in the application process was shared with the management team in order for them to get the feeling of involvement from the very beginning of this journey. With this insight, they can now support other colleagues in the science-based target process and also understand the investments and changes that must be made. For example, in how we conduct our business trips. If we, for example, can change transportation mode from plane to train, we show the rest of the company that we walk the talk, and I think that's the key to success. We have subsequently broke down our overall theoretical goal into 5 concrete sub-goals: energy, purchase of goods and service, waste, transport, and business travel. Each sub-goal in turn has goals that must be met to achieve the overall goal. After the breakdown into sub-goals, we have involved concerned colleagues from different departments. This has resulted in a number of different projects with goals that make the sub-goals met. This step is fun and gives energy to the organization because the individual employee gets a feeling of ownership where each person can make a difference in a concrete way to this very theoretical model. These sub-goals are underlying projects or our reduction plan to achieve our overall goal. We have synchronized the sub-goals with our sustainability strategy and our packaging policy, so that everything is connected and that we have a clear strategy for what we want to achieve and in what steps. One example, the sub-goal energy include new renewable energy, which is also a part of our sustainability strategy. Different steps come together in concrete projects. One example is solar cells, where we have the current situation about our footprint and how large part the energy is of our total emission and how much we have to reduce to reach our sub-goal and our overall goal. We have broken down the sub-goal energy into a number of activities that you can see here in the action list. And one of them is that we will invest in solar cells. So my key learnings that I want to share with you are update the management during the journey around the application, break down the work in the reduction plan so it becomes concrete, inform internally at different levels so your colleagues are involved when there are concrete projects and implementation. Last but not least, take the help of experts from the field. Do not reinvent the wheel. Thanks for me.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Action plans on reducing emissions is key to success when it comes to targets.
So, to our final panelist, Jostein Iversen. He represents Grieg Seafood. And Jostein Iversen, he has a role as the Global Sustainability Advisor in Grieg Seafood. He has a technical background, being a project engineer, and he has also worked in projects with zero emission projects and also plastic waste issues. So welcome, Jostein. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you. Thank you very much, CEMAsys, for being invited to this fora. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope you find my presentation inspiring. As Nora mentioned, I work as a global sustainability advisor in Grieg Seafood, and in this presentation, I aim to present you how we work towards our greenhouse gas commitment and how we approach the issues related to supply chain emissions, especially. So there has been some interesting presentations here. I hope you guys who are listening to this is taking a bunch of notes. These topics are quite challenging to work with. So my notebook is quite full already. So keep it up. Okay, businesses are facing more and stricter requirements from its suppliers and customers. And this is expected to increase in the future. Yeah, I hope my presentation will inspire to action and climate commitment, as we need as much brain power as possible to solve the challenges ahead. Okay, Greek Seafood is a global food producer that delivers 2.3 million meals every day. We produce Atlantic salmon in Norway and Canada. In Norway, we produce in the south in Rogaland and in Finnmark in the north. In Canada, we produce salmon in British Columbia in the west, and we are currently establishing a new region in Placentia Bay in Newfoundland. Greek Seafood employs 950 persons today. When it comes to sustainability, this is a key part of our business, as we are dependent on healthy and resilient ecosystems for our salmon productions. We produce salmons in the commons, and that's a key part of our production. We approach our business through these 5 pillars: profit and innovation, healthy oceans, sustainable food, people, and local communities. These pillars consist of several different topics, where I intend to focus on the sustainable food and how we work towards reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. But first, I would like to address some of the challenges we face today as an industry, as a food producer. We need to ensure biodiversity and coexistence with the species that we share the ecosystem with. The fish need good conditions for us to be able to deliver high quality proteins to consumers. We acknowledge that fish health and welfare is not sufficiently maintained in today's practice, and that's why we effortlessly work to improve on this front. Sourcing sustainable feed is currently the biggest challenge we face in the food industry, especially in regards to climate and environment issues. That's why it's our main focus and how we work to reduce our climate footprint. We need to reduce the amount of waste generated from our production. Ocean plastic is a threat to wildlife and needs to be handled better in the future. Plastic management is important for us, and we are working with implementing a more circular approach to the different aquaculture equipment we use today. And last but not least, we are the last generation that can act to save the planet from global warming. That means that we have a responsibility to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. Doing this in a way that is sustainable is probably the biggest challenge companies face today. So, science-based targets. Okay, in 2020, we set a science-based target with a 2018 baseline. Greek Seafood aims to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in line with the Paris Agreement by cutting 35% of our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by 2030, and also 100% by 2050. Becoming carbon neutral without the use of carbon offsets is truly difficult. According to Bill Gates' newest book, that I wholeheartedly recommend you all, we need to get to zero in 2050. Salmon farming is not facing any industry-specific technology barriers today. Barriers that we see in cement or steel industry, for example. It is actually possible to reach zero-emission food production. It is an important part of the puzzle to voice the demands, challenge the status quo, and establish the customer trust that will be required for companies to outlast the green transition. So how do we work with greenhouse gas emissions? We are reporting our greenhouse gas emissions annually according to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. This is the most used accounting manual today, and it's also a requirement from Aquaculture Stewardship Council. HSC is a renowned certificate that focuses on responsible farming practices and environmental criteria. We are working with certifying all of our sites the coming years. The Carbon Disclosure Project is a non-profit company that collects and rates companies' greenhouse gas management. Last year, we received a top mark and is quite proud of that. We are currently establishing carbon. The science-based target has been covered quite good in this presentation, so I think I'll just skip that. More on our greenhouse gas commitment. We are currently establishing carbon reduction plans, which we use for strategical purposes on how we reach our targets. There are many paths to achieve our targets, but there are also many pitfalls. Climate-related scenarios and risk management is a key part of our sustainability strategy. So what types of emissions do we have in the salmon farming industry today? According to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the emissions are divided into 3 different scopes. Scope 1 contains the direct sources of emissions. These are mainly diesel consumption from our workboats and generators used for feeding purposes. A large part of our operational emissions are addressed to the live transportation of fish from farms to processing. Scope 2 are indirect sources like electricity and heating purposes. Electricity for offices, and over half of our feeding barges in Norway are currently supplied by mostly renewable energy. But the elephant in the room, 90% of our emissions is related to supply chain and indirectly to our own production. The main sources of these emissions are related to downstream transportation from production to market and also feed procurement. We are working with reducing our footprint in all 3 scopes through different projects and investments. I would love to tell you more about how we address zero emission boats and fish species recovery, as my background is in engineering. But the focus of my presentation today is on supply chain emissions and its challenges. It is essential for us to collaborate with our suppliers to be able to meet our greenhouse gas targets. This means that we have to work together with the most sustainable businesses there is. We have to choose suppliers after a set of criteria that are in line with our strategy and targets. We also have to follow up our suppliers through tracking and reporting to ensure that we don't go astray. And how do we ensure that our selected suppliers are working with us? We have to be clear on what we want from our partnership. This is covered in the following description of the preferred supplier. Our supplier code of conduct is a document that ensures that Grieg Seafood's ESG criteria is stated and understood. All suppliers is required to follow this document and encouraged to require the same code of conduct from its own suppliers. Ambitious greenhouse gas targets, greenhouse gas accounting, and transferable sharing of data is important for keeping up the commitment over time. In practical terms, this means that we prefer suppliers that report the climate footprint in CDP and also set science-based targets. Finally, the products that we use also needs to maintain the requirements related to sustainable product design. This is necessary to be able to reduce the carbon footprint, increase recyclability, and allow for a circular economy transition. Grieg Seafood works continuously to gradually adapt its business to maintain these ideas. Working with pre-competitive business cases with our suppliers are necessary in improving our own sustainability. Improving on our sustainability issues is also in line with proper business conduct, where product demand and profit will follow. Businesses that does not see their own role in the system that they are a part of will lose in the competition ahead. Thank you for that attention.
Thank you so much for that, Jostein. the work you do with your suppliers is so impressive. It looks like it's already creating rings in the water, or may I say rings in the salty ocean where the salmon live. Thank you.